The people of Georgia are angry. The people of the country are angry. And there's nothing wrong with saying that, that you've recalculated.
Well, Mr. President, the challenge that you have is the data you have is wrong.
It's more illegal for you than it is for them because you know what they did and you're not reporting it. That's a criminal offense. And you can't let that happen. That's a big risk to you and to Ryan, your lawyer. That's a big risk. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state.
Mr. President, you have people that submit information, and we have our people that submit information, and then it comes before the court, and the court then has to make a determination. We have to stand by our numbers. We believe our numbers are right.
Well, under law, you're not allowed to give faulty election results, okay? You're not allowed to do that, and that's what you've done. This is a faulty election result. And honestly, this should go very fast. You should meet tomorrow because you have a big election coming up, and because of what you've done to the president, the people of Georgia know that this was a scam. And because of what you've done to the president, a lot of people aren't going out to vote. And a lot of Republicans are going to vote negative because they hate what you did to the president, okay? They hate it. And they're going to vote. And if you would be really respected, if this thing could be straightened out before the election. You have a big election coming up on Tuesday.
So that's President Trump berating, begging, threatening the Republican Secretary of State of Georgia, Brad Raffensperger. Legal experts say Trump's call to Raffensperger appears to violate state and federal laws, with former Obama administration Solicitor General Neil Katyal telling the Washington Post it, quote, demonstrates an impeachable, perhaps criminal offense. Trump plans to address Georgia voters this evening at a rally in the conservative stronghold of Dalton, represented by the newly elected QAnon-supporting Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. Senator Perdue is in quarantine and campaigning virtually after he said he was exposed to a staffer who tested positive for COVID. Meanwhile, President-elect Biden will campaign in Atlanta. Vice President-elect Kamala Harris hit the campaign trail in Savannah over the weekend to support Democratic Senate candidates Reverend Raphael Warnock, pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, where Dr. King grew up and preached, and John Ossoff. This is Ossoff responding to Trump's phone call during a speech to supporters.
At this moment, when the President of the United States calls up Georgia's election officials and tries to intimidate them to change the result of the election, to disenfranchise Georgia voters, to disenfranchise black voters in Georgia who delivered this state for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. That is a direct attack on our democracy.
For more, we go to Atlanta, where we're joined by Insee Ufat, the CEO of New Georgia Project and New Georgia Project Action Fund, organizations that have played a key role in mobilizing voters for the 2020 election and now for Tuesday's runoff election. Over 3 million Georgia residents have already cast their ballots in a record turnout for runoff elections. Insee, welcome to Democracy Now! Can you first respond to this just astounding audio tape of the president threatening, beseeching, berating the Republican Secretary of State of Georgia?
It's astounding, Amy, and good morning. It's unfortunate, though, that this appears to be a continuation of the sort of treatment that our Secretary of State and our governor have been on the receiving end of since the November elections were called. I remember sort of experiencing a lot of pressure to congratulate him and to praise him for sort of refusing the president's attempt and quite frankly, refusing the National Republican Party's attempts to engage in a criminal conspiracy to steal the elections. I don't pretend to be a constitutional scholar, but I don't know how this is unconstitutional. This has to be criminal.
I mean, you clearly are not a fan of Brian Kemp, who beat Stacey Abrams, one of your colleagues, in the Get Out the Vote campaign that has just been astounding throughout Georgia, a model for the country, or the Republican Secretary of State. You've had problems with issues of voter suppression. But what was your response to how Brad Raffensperger and his attorney, who was on the call, Ryan Germany, what did Trump say when he was talking to Ryan Germany? He said, what's wrong with you? I heard your lawyer is very difficult, actually, but I'm sure you're a good lawyer. You have a nice last name.
Wow. Is my reaction. But one, I mean, I was like, this is absurd. Under any other circumstances, again, this would be disqualifying. I think my concern, or think, one, the Secretary of State's office knew that they were recording the phone call. And so my response is, you know, they comported themselves, I guess, as if they knew that the phone call was being recorded, and they comported themselves as if they knew that they would eventually release it. Again, they are doing their jobs fairly, but in some areas, they are still very much attacking our sort of elections infrastructure, constructing barriers to participation that Georgia voters have to clear in order to exercise the franchise and participate in our elections.
Which are what? What are those obstacles, even still?
We are talking about they have cut the number of days for early voting during these runoffs. They have cut the number of early voting locations in some major counties like Cobb County. They've cut over half of the early voting locations. They have cut the number of ballot drop boxes where people can, in a COVID-safe way, drop off their absentee ballots. They have announced that they intend to criminally prosecute any group or individual that provides comfort to voters who are waiting in long lines. So our line-warming sort of comfort activities, hot chocolate, pizza at the polls, water at the polls, scarves, gloves, PPE. If groups participate, they have been threatened by the Secretary of State in his most recent memo with criminal prosecution. So we are...
I want to go to President Trump, specifically attacking your colleague, the former gubernatorial candidate, Stacey Abrams.
And Stacey Abrams is laughing about, she's going around saying these guys are dumber than a rock. What she's done to this party is unbelievable, I tell you. And I only ran against her once, and that was with a guy named Brian Kemp, and I beat her. And if I didn't run, Brian wouldn't have had even a shot, either in the general or in the primary. He was dead as a doornail. He never thought he had a shot at either one of them. What a schmuck I was.
So there is Trump doing what he feels so comfortable doing, attacking a powerful woman of color. But talk about what you, what Stacey Abrams, what all of these voter groups have done right now. Tomorrow is the election, even though millions have already voted in Seufat. What do you see as the hope for tomorrow?
Great. The hope for tomorrow is that Georgians will block out misinformation, disinformation, and show up at the polls in overwhelming numbers so that we can neutralize all these voter suppression tactics that we see playing out in the state, that we can be reasonably assured that the will of the people is reflected in the results of our election. And as for Leader Abrams, I think that her intervention she's the architect of an ecosystem, right? So that has exposed many of the deficiencies in Georgia's sort of elections and democracy infrastructure, and has helped start and launch organizations and has invested in leaders that has helped us register almost 1 million Georgians of color in all 159 of Georgia's counties. We have historic levels of turnout. I remember in the aftermath of the November general election, there was so much hand-wringing about the structural advantage that the Republicans have in a runoff election because their base is older and wider. And don't you know that historic turnout, is 30%, 40%, so we shouldn't even bother. Quite frankly, that this will be the most expensive Senate races, the most expensive congressional races in the history of American politics. And the enemies of progress have always had more money, but what we have is people power. And we've seen that during the early voting period with over 3 million Georgians voting already, over 1 million of them being Black Georgians. We've seen historic youth participation, historic youth turnout, and I think that we will see elevated turnout again on Tuesday, tomorrow.
What did your helping to prep your mom, you moved from Nigeria to Georgia, for her citizenship test, teach you about citizenship as we wrap up, you'd say?
Okay. Well, my mother and I became citizens together. And so while she worked a second job to hire an immigration attorney, it was my responsibility to make sure that we passed the citizenship exam. And so what it has taught me is, one, that a government of, for, and by the people is an aspiration, and it's something that we have to fight for every day, and it's something that we have to work for. I pledged an allegiance to this country, to the Constitution. I pledged to defend it against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And we are witnessing a domestic attack on our country, on our Constitution, on our way of life. And I encourage all Georgians and all the people under the sound of my voice to join us in not only electing champions, people who will co-govern.
3 seconds.
Yes, and so go out and vote tomorrow.
It genuinely does feel like history has found the two of you and put you in this position because so much does rest on this race, and there could not be two better individuals to represent the Democratic Party and the hopes and dreams of tens of millions of Americans.
We need to invest in America. One of the things that both John and I agree on, and we've been talking about, is a historic investment in infrastructure, which would include also green infrastructure, so that we create jobs with a livable wage for people in the short term and position the American economy to compete in a global world amidst increasing globalization.
Reverend and I were discussing this recently, and how an infrastructure plan can really unite the people of the state because of the economic opportunity that it represents for communities, urban, suburban, and rural. Because if done right, it will mean equitable access to economic opportunity for marginalized communities, because it means that those 9 rural hospitals that have closed in 10 years can be replaced and more built. It means clinics can be built in underserved areas. It means rural broadband, which is the rural electrification of our time. It means environmental remediation where there's been contamination. It means the kinds of investments in clean energy that mean we're not only building a sustainable economy, but also one where Georgia is the leading producer of clean energy in the region. That is an initiative that can unite the people of this state, that can break down partisan barriers.
Zach, it is 2021. 2020 is over.
We made it. We made it.
The year that we all wish we could somehow erase from the memory banks. There were some good things that happened. I mean, Joe won. That was epic. That's the main thing that sticks out to me in a good way.
That's a big one. Donald Trump not being president anymore. For half the country.
Yeah, Joe's gonna get sworn in just a couple of weeks. Thank goodness. So far, 2021 is off to a fine start, but we're gonna know a whole lot more about how we're gonna feel about 2021 this week. January 5th, Tuesday, the Georgia special Senate runoffs both take place. One of the things I'm scratching my chin about is, are we going to know the results on Tuesday night?
No way. 0% chance.
Because if it's close, there's going to be a recount. Especially if the Republicans lose, there's going to be if Democrats come close, either side is very much entitled to a recount. It may be close. It may be very close. We actually have some parts of a conversation I had with both John Ossoff and Reverend Warnock a little bit later in this show. So just to be clear to folks, this is not like they didn't sit for a podcast interview. So don't get your hopes up for a very long discourse with the Senate candidates. But I did interview them for an event, and we have some parts of that event a little bit later on. I did get to know both Reverend Warnock and John Ossoff over the last number of weeks, and they're great. They are truly awesome leaders, public servants. They would make phenomenal senators. Their opponents, David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler, are really not great at all. They're really, there's some Republicans I'm just like, I kind of like this person, or, this person really has something to say. And that does not really describe David Perdue or Kelly Loeffler.
So for those of you who have not, for those of you listening who have not followed this race, the political Senate race in Georgia for the past number of months, which may include me in some ways, because I'm politics out in a lot of ways post the presidential election. Can you give us like an overview of what the hell's going on in Georgia? You mentioned the people running, but where we're at, and just catch us all up to speed.
Oh, I will set the stage, sure. For those of you who are like Zach. No, Zach.
Sorry, man. I'm sick of politics.
These races are so high stakes, it's unbelievable. Where right now, the Senate is essentially 48 Democrat, 50 Republican. And so if Democrats win both of these seats, it becomes 50-50, and then the Vice President, Kamala Harris, will be the tiebreaker. So you go from Republican control of the Senate and Mitch McConnell as the majority leader, who gets to decide what gets voted on and doesn't get voted on, to Chuck Schumer, the majority leader, demote Mitch McConnell to the minority, and then you have a really different landscape in terms of what can happen out of Washington. And let's jump to the biggest example of this, which is cash relief, and then we'll come back to the Georgia race. So right now, as we're having this conversation, we are approximately 5 senatorial votes shy of approximately 180 to 200 million Americans getting $2,000 each. Actually, it's higher, because I saw the total dollar amount. It's something, because it's a more expansive definition this time, it's something like 237 million Americans getting $2,000 each. There are literally 5 human beings standing in the way of that happening. And it's infuriating, it boggles my mind. There are times when I think to myself, I can't believe we're this close to this happening. And then most of the time, I'm like, I can't believe this is not happening, given how close it is, and that there are these 5 assholes. You can just pick any 5. Where, imagine if you had the power to send out $2,000 to 237 million people, and you thought, no, let's not do that. Even though there's a pandemic, even though over $10 million has been lost, even though there are food lines for miles, even though millions of Americans are facing evictions again during a pandemic, let's not do that.
Yeah, every other country too. Developed country.
Yeah, developed countries are doing the common sense thing, which is like, hey, stay home, and we should send you some money so you can stay home and not be freaking out, not be stressed out, and and not feel like you have to go out and work to survive. I mean, there are essential workers who we are very grateful for working, but there are a lot of folks who are somewhere in this gray area where it's like, well, I don't have enough to survive, so I guess I have to go out there and look for business as my, as like let's say Uber driver or something like that. And
Retail.
So retail, in some cases non-essential. So we are this close, and the dynamic around cash relief, it is fascinating how it's developed. So I'm going to rewind for a minute, and listeners to the podcast know about the main cash relief component. So I won't review that in depth. But this $2,000 a month proposal really got kickstarted by Donald Trump in a very, very big way. So it was floating around the Senate and the House. It essentially settled on $600, which was previously zero. So there was part of me that was like, well, $600 sucks, but sure is a hell of a lot better than zero. And at $600 a head, it included dependents. So if you're like a single mom with 2 kids, you get $1,800. So like it wasn't zero, but sure, it wasn't as good as $2,000. So then Donald Trump comes out and says this should be $2,000 a head. And then the politics of it shuffle. Now, to her great credit, and Chuck Schumer's great credit, the Democrats then just come out full bore and are like, heck yes, let's do it. like Trump says $2,000, and then the House is like, yeah, let's do it. And they hold an up or down vote on the $2,000, and this also is a huge credit to our representatives. 2/3 of the House approves the $2,000 check and cash relief proposal almost immediately, including dozens of Republicans. So you get like a real consensus in the House saying yes to $2,000. And then it goes to the Senate. And here's where it gets wild, is you have a handful of Republicans who come out and say, yeah, I'm on board with the $2,000. So it starts with Josh Hawley, who's been for it the whole time. But then Marco Rubio comes out and says, I am for it. Then Lindsey Graham comes forward and says, I am for it. Then, and here's where Georgia comes into play, the 2 Georgia senators who know that their political career is like neck and neck on the line, come out and say, I'm for it too. So at this point you have 5 Republican senators, you have virtually all of the Democrats, so you're at like 53 or so. And then to make it filibuster proof, you need to get to 60. And then there were 2 other senators that also came out for it, so you're about 5 votes away. And that's the picture as it stands right now as we're talking. Mitch McConnell then has the most ridiculous objection ever. He's like, no $2,000 checks because it would be quote-unquote socialism for the rich, which makes zero sense. Because the checks are to some extent means tested, so if you are really rich, you probably don't get them.
Yep.
But then if you look at the 237 million people who are going to get them, the vast majority of those people are not rich at all. So it really, what he's saying made zero sense, and it's just total nonsense and bullshit.
And he's the one who passed and drove through the tax cuts for the rich and the large companies. So the socialism for the rich.
That was truly socialism for the rich.
Ridiculous. And Bernie called him out on it. So give Bernie Sanders a lot of,
I give Bernie so much credit because he's been championing the relief checks harder than anyone.
Bernie's been our voice on this in many ways. He's been cool because you are now sitting center for a lot of reasons.
I mean, we had a call with Bernie a couple weeks ago, and he's been our voice on this for sure.
It's time for everyone's favorite ad. Hello, Tushy. New rear, new you, baby. In 2021, don't just make a commitment to wash your hands every time you go to the bathroom. Go the extra mile and use a bidet, which is pretty cool. And wash your underside. So the future of toileting has arrived, guys. I love this thing. This sounds weird, but bidets are way better than frankly, the traditional toilet paper that we've all been using. So I've been thrilled with using Hello Tushy, and the brand new Hello Tushy 3.0 bidet attachment is fantastic, and you save money on toilet paper. It is more environmentally friendly. It is cleaner. I freaking love this thing. So there's no need to wipe. You just use it, wash off, and go. And every bidet attachment has a 60-day risk-free guarantee and a 12-month warranty. So you can try it risk-free, which is pretty awesome, because I know people are very sensitive to how they use the bath and what they do in there. This, if you try it and you love it, you have a brand new routine. If you don't like it, no worries. So here's the deal. If you go to hellotushy.com/yang, you'll get 10% off plus free shipping. So you can try out the bidet and get 10% off and get free shipping. It's a special offer for our Yang Speeds listeners. Go to hellotushy, TUSHY.com/yang for 10% off. That's hellotushy.com/yang.
So another example of the shifting dynamics, Lindsey Graham then comes out and says, hey, we should have a vote on this. And I bet if we have a vote, it passes. like he goes against Mitch McConnell, being like, look, if you put this out in front of the senators, like it's really going to be political suicide to say no to this thing. And then here's where the plot thickens even more. So Bernie Sanders gets up and says, we should not let this defense authorization bill pass unless we have a vote on the $2,000. So the Senate's rules are very, very pro-senator in that essentially any senator can like filibuster something and like impede progress unless it gets overrun by like, you know, near like super majorities essentially. So Bernie steps forward and says, hey, no vote on the defense authorization bill without the $2,000 checks. The defense authorization bill is essentially needed to like fund the military. It's very, very foundational. Like, so it was very brave of Bernie. And then when the Republicans then said, hey, screw you, Bernie, let's just override this thing and get this show moving, the vast majority of Democrats joined the Republicans in saying, let's override Bernie. 41 of them, to be precise. There were 6 senators in the Democratic Party who decided to stay with Bernie and say, like, yeah, let's not do this thing, unless we can vote on the $2,000 checks. So I don't know how you feel about this, Zach, but a lot of people are pissed off about it because they're like, wait a minute, Bernie stood up and did the Spartacus thing and was like, you know, I'm going to, or the Gandalf thing, or whatever your favorite, like, you know, heroic stand against the tide is. Yeah, but like this shall not pass, really. And then only 6 Democrats decided to not vote against Bernie on this. And the 6 senators, if I remember them, are Elizabeth Warren, Ed Markey, Jeff Merkley, Ron Wyden, and I'm missing
just the far left.
Chris Van Hollen was another. Like, and I gotta say, like, when I looked at that list of senators, I was like, I now love those senators because they actually are legit for real. They were willing to stand with Bernie against this vote to fund the military to try and fight for $2,000 checks. And it did pain me that there were not more of them.
I'll say this. It is fun. Before you ran for president, you wouldn't have been able to talk about any of this. Like the fact that, you know, how much you've learned, or we've had to learn on how the Senate works and Congress works and who the players are is fascinating and kind of fun. This to me is more of a question. Does it show you just who these guys actually represent? The fact that Bernie's like, hey, we're not voting on like the millions of the billions of dollars we're going to spend on these private companies or these all these defense budgets we've approved before we give money to the people. Like, I'm going to stand for the people, and only 6 people lined up behind him. Is that like a good, healthy indication of where what our Congress actually represents right now, who they actually are representing? Or that's where my head goes. I don't know what you think on that.
You know, I think it was a brave, potentially politically unpopular stance to take. I wish more Democrats had decided to side with Bernie. If like everyone just stood up and were like, yeah, let's not do anything until we get this $2,000 up or down vote. If you get that vote in front of the floor, I think you get another 5 Republican senators just to be like, what am I going to do? Stand in the way of my people $2,000 checks like an idiot? Like, it's one thing. And the dynamic with the Georgia senators is instructive, where they're literally getting voted on, like right now or tomorrow. And they were like, well, I certainly don't want to be on the record as against this thing, especially because they were getting beaten up by John Ossoff and Reverend Warnock as not being for $2,000 cash stimulus, which is a very politically unpopular place to be. I mean, the last numbers I saw were something like 88% of Americans favor some cash relief during the pandemic. And then, like, the popularity varies based on the level, but it's still very, very popular.
And Ossoff and Warnock have received a bump in the polls for what they're worth. They are polls. The polls in Georgia were relatively accurate in the presidential election this cycle. It said it was going to be a toss-up, likely leaning Democrat, and that's exactly what panned out. And so they've gotten a bump recently because we think of their support in cash relief, and it seems to be a nonpartisan support from the voters in Georgia and nationwide. And then plus it's a press cycle too, over and over on this issue right before election day, right?
Yeah, Mitch McConnell literally at some point said, it's like, well, we need to try and help these senators. So that was one of his drives between authorizing the $600 cash relief, and then now you know that Mitch has essentially signed off on the two of them coming out for the $2,000, and then he said, like, I'm going to kill this thing. You don't need to take responsibility for doing it. Like that almost certainly has gone on behind the scenes. Really, in many ways, the other question is like Marco Rubio, Lindsey Graham, the other Republican senators who are coming out being like, let's do this thing. You know that there are another dozen Republican senators who are thinking the same thing. And if, again, it came to a vote, they would just be like, yeah, let's do it. Like some of the folks that I think might be in that camp, I think Mitt Romney's a possibility. I think Rob Portman of Ohio is a possibility. I think there are other folks that if they had a vote, like they would do it. So the politics of cash relief, and this is a silver lining to this thing, is that cash is such a winning policy at this point that virtually every Democrat supports it and a lot of Republicans support it, and among the American people that's widely popular. And the socialism thing just isn't working for people anymore, like the demonization of socialism, because we've been bailing out the banks and corporations to like such a high degree where everyone's like looking like, wait a minute, like what are you what are you complaining about? It's like what happened to all these rich corporations that are just getting money hand over fist?
All right, guys, we have a new sponsor, and I wanted to tell you about it because it's pretty cool. If you're tired of using some of these big-name household products that you don't really know where they came from, you know if they're good for the environment, you know if they're good, they're treating their workers right, you honestly don't. And so I want to talk to you about something called Public Goods, which is essentially a one-stop shop for sustainable, high-quality, everyday essentials made from clean ingredients at an affordable price. So everything from Lily coffee to shampoo, to toothpaste, to pet food. It's your new everything store, but it's thoughtfully designed for the conscious consumer. I've tried a couple things. They have a surface cleaner that I think is pretty great, comes in a cool spray bottle. I have tried their olive oil recently that I love. Not the best cook, but I have been doing a little bit, and they've sent me some cool stuff. And their toothpaste, actually pretty awesome. Just replaced my Crest nonsense that I've just been grabbing at the pharmacy when I go. But they have literally it's everything. So the box that I have of Public Goods has been ranging from like food to pet food to cleaning materials. Rather than buying from a bunch of single product brands, Public Goods member can buy all their premium essentials in one place in a beautiful website, beautiful aesthetic. They look cool. They are good. They're ethically sourced, and they obsessively develop their stuff to be free of things that are unhealthy or harmful additives that are still common on drug and grocery store shelves. And very, very committed to making the product healthy. So why we love them. There's a commitment to, frankly, humanity. We talked to Public Goods, and we've now just worked out as a new sponsor here an exclusive deal just for Yang Speaks podcast listeners. So we see $15 off your first Public Goods order with no minimum purchase. It's $15 off your first order, no minimum purchase. They're so confident that you'll love their product and come back again and again. They're just going to give you $15 spending your first purchase. It's pretty cool. So go to publicgoods.com/Yang and use that, or just use the code Yang at checkout, YNG. So it's PUBLICGOODS.com/Yang to receive $15, $15 off your first order. Check out Public Goods, guys. It's pretty freaking cool.
I will confess to you, Zach, that my sense as to the odds of the Democrats winning have changed. My sense has changed over the last number of days and weeks. So you know, you and I have spent a lot of time in Georgia, knocking on doors and having events for both candidates. The energy has grown a lot over time. When we got started, there was a lot of pessimism about Democrats' chances in Georgia. And there were a few very, very reasonable reasons to be pessimistic. Now, yeah, so like I certainly would talk very optimistically, but if you looked at the landscape, you would say, okay, historically, Democrats have fared very poorly in runoffs in Georgia specifically. That's not like a good data point. Where the last time there was a Democratic runoff in Georgia, just like, you know, it was really, really tight in the actual race, and the person lost by like 10 points or something. So that's not a great precedent. The other precedent is actually buried in the Georgia vote totals themselves, where Joe won Georgia by 12,000 votes, very, very thin margin, I mean millions of votes cast. And David Perdue had got more votes than Jon Ossoff by maybe something like 60 or 70,000. So there were at least some 70, 80,000 Georgians who showed up, voted for Joe Biden, and then voted for David Perdue and not Jon Ossoff. Now, that total number was, you know, maybe less than 100,000 Georgians, but still, like if you see November as like the high water marks, then you think, okay, the odds are that the Republican wins, because there were at least some 80 to 100,000 Georgians who split their ticket, and split their ticket in a way that is not positive for Jon Ossoff. So those were some of the data points you had coming in. Another data point in the Warnock-Loeffler race. Reverend Warnock got significantly more votes than Kelly Loeffler in that race, but there were something like 6 significant candidates, and the Republicans got significantly more votes than the Democrats in that race. So if you look at all of the data going in, you were like, this is probably going to be a real steep uphill climb for Democrats in Georgia. And then that was compounded by the fact that day one, early on in the Georgia race, the Republicans piled in a big way, where the Mitch McConnell Senate super PAC bought tens of millions of dollars in ads. They sent 1,000 operatives. Like they descended in force in a way that seemed to supplement their advantage.
What's your prediction? Like, I was with you where it's like, I don't think the Dems will be able to pull this off. I thought it was likely to maybe split. Looked like Kelly Loeffler is hateable enough, and kind of disgusting human who sells her stocks before when she finds out Corona's happening instead of warning the American
She literally
people.
gave it enough thought where she like bought Zoom. She was like, what's going to benefit in this terrible time? Yeah, it was scummy. Though David Perdue did something similar. They both got dinged on insider trading on the coronavirus.
And David Perdue doesn't seem doesn't seem any better. But he's at least won an election before. I think she was appointed, right? So, but my thought was, I thought the Dems would split, but it's looking like they may have a better shot than I thought. I still think they split. That's my prediction. But I've been wrong before. I thought Trump was going to win.
I'm going to push against you on this, Zach, where, so I agree with you wholeheartedly that David Perdue has a much more real connection to the people of Georgia than Kelly Loeffler. Everyone knows the Perdue name. It's very, very famous in Georgia, and David Perdue's won an election in Georgia. So, you know, he's been the senator. Everyone's like, yeah, he's our senator. Kelly Loeffler, like you said, just got appointed last year, and everyone's like, what? She's our senator, what? And driving around Georgia, I saw many more David Perdue signs than I saw Kelly Loeffler signs. Like, David Perdue actually has some real affection there in a way that Kelly Loeffler does not. That said, I do not think it is feasible at all that hundreds of thousands of Georgians show up and split the ticket. Like, I do not think that they're going to show up and say, David Perdue, yes, but then I'm going to, not vote in the other or vote for Reverend Warnock. Like, I just don't see it, particularly given the inflammatory nature of the messaging on the Republican side, where there's just been essentially it's been fear. Like that's like their great motivator for their voters right now. Like, vote for David Perdue to save America. Radical left is Jon Ossoff. Radical left is Reverend Warnock. Even though Jon Ossoff's a white dude, like, there's just been a lot of very racialized advertising against both him and Reverend Warnock in particular. Some of the stuff they've done with the Reverend Warnock advertising has been completely out of context. Like, he had something where he was saying, hey, we should free people who are in jail for marijuana, which I 100% agree with, and most people agree with. And they just played the clip being like, we have to bring our kids home. It made it seem like he wanted just to free everyone.
Yeah. So they take clips out of his sermons where he's all fired up for literally 2 seconds, and they're like, listen to him say that. Like, I hate when people do that. I hate that. And most people have got better about it, but political ads have not.
Well, so my point is that I just don't see a lot of ticket splitting. I think a lot of people are just going to show up and go DD or RR.
Yeah.
So even though I do believe that David Perdue has a more authentic relationship with voters than Kelly Loeffler does, I think either they both win or they both lose.
So, and who do you think is? You think the Dems will pull this off? Are you allowed to make prediction?
So the data points that have come in that have made people more excited and positive. Turnout in the early vote has been up across the board, particularly in Democratic-leaning areas. 100,000 Georgians who did not vote in November have already voted in the runoff. Now think about that for a second. How the heck are you in Georgia? You missed the presidential, which is the highest stakes presidential ever, and then now you've early voted in this race. And I have a feeling that the bulk of those 100,000 people are young people or disenfranchised people that actually got activated by a grassroots organization during this time. I think 22,000, for example, 17-year-olds turned 18. so that might be a chunk of the 100,000. And for people who don't know, I co-founded an organization called Winvote's Seats that has funneled over $2.5 million to 16 organizations that are activating voters in Georgia, primarily voters of color, like New Georgia Project and CARES and Black Male Voters Project, and a series of others. So these organizations have been going on the ground in buses, just showing up and activating voters. And I think that's where the new 100,000 came from. Because if you're a Republican in Georgia, you voted for Trump in November. That's pretty clear. So those two data points are very, very positive for Democrats. Turnout surge on Election Day, January 5th. And as you're listening to this, it's quite likely that Donald Trump is rallying in Georgia January 4th because he's actually showing up in Georgia to try and get out the vote. If some proportion of voters sit this one out on the Republican side, then the Democrats win. And that percentage does not need to be enormous. If, let's say, 5 to 10% of the folks who showed up in November are I was there for Trump and it's not Trump this time, and Trump had some issues with the process, and maybe this process isn't even fair, maybe I'm just going to sit this one out, I have better things to do. If that happens, then Democrats win. That's one reason why Trump is coming back in on the 4th. The Republican Party's been begging him to try and activate his voters in Georgia, to try and get their turnout up. So the signs are good for Democrats in that they've done their job. They've gotten their voters to vote early.
So I think that's a politician's answer of saying you probably advantage Ossoff and Warnock, advantage Democrats in this one, and you may be right. I think the Republicans are in a bit of a catch-22 where it's hey, the election results were fake, but hey, make sure you vote in this election because we need it. It's tough to say both of those things.
Literally, this is one thing that I thought was like a sign of how weird it got in Georgia on the Republican side. The Secretary of State of Georgia is Republican, you know, so like he's on their team. And then Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue like were attacking him and like calling him, I think, to resign. And then he was like, I'm not resigning. And they were doing it because they thought that would be like a sign of loyalty to Trump. And that's I think one reason why Loeffler and Perdue have come out for the $2,000 checks is they've pretty much been like, this is the Trump train and we're going to get on it for everything. And if that includes trashing the Republican Secretary of State, saying that the process wasn't fair, then let's do that too. And so then turning around and then saying it's like, but we need you to vote. Then you're like, wait, didn't you just like trash this this guy, this process? It's a strange narrative. And is it going to be enough to keep a few voters home? We will find out.
We'll find out. Who knows? Oh man. Look, if we learn anything from the November election is that, frankly, most of the country, if you live in an urban city in this nation, you, generally speaking, have no idea what people around the rest of the world, particularly in red states, think, what they're doing. And we find out on election day every time. In 2016, we're like, oh, they're really upset. Because there's no media, there's no local media, there's no way for them for stories to kind of be lifted up. So election day is in many ways the only way we find out what's happening in rural America, which is dark, but I think there's some accuracy there. Yang Speaks is brought to you by Helix Sleep. Guys, I'm moving into a new apartment in New York City. Very, very exciting. It's gonna be my little home office situation. Very, very COVID friendly. I'm pumped. And I had to get rid of my old mattress because I've outgrown it. It's been a while. So I've gotten a new mattress from Helix Sleep, and it comes in this beautiful box. Extremely comfortable, designed for moving. I got to get all new sheets on it and stuff too. Getting a new mattress is awesome, and Helix Sleep is one of your best options out there. So basically how it works, in typical Yang Speaks fashion, Helix Sleep does some data gathering before you get your mattress. You take this quiz, it's like 2 minutes, not even really 2 minutes. It's like, let's call it 90 seconds. And it matches your body type and sleep preferences to the right mattress for you. So if it's soft or firm, or you like you're a side sleeper or a back sleeper. So when you're looking for a mattress, you take the quiz, you get the mattress, it shows up at your doorstep. You can add on sheets and pillows or whatever else you need for your bed. And it comes right to your door within 10 business days. Pretty cool. They've been awarded #1 best overall mattress pick in 2020 by GQ and Wired magazine, which is pretty cool. So these people, I want to be the guy that gets to vet out mattresses. But anyway, I vetted out this one, and it's freaking great. So here you go. Go to helixsleep.com/yang, take their 2-minute sleep quiz, and they'll match you to a customized mattress that'll give you the best sleep of your life. And I mean that, because I've had some of the best sleep of my life in this new mattress that I'm moving my new apartment with. So right now, Helix is offering up to $200 off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows for our listeners. That's helixsleep.com/yang. Helix, HELIX, sleep.com/yang. Get up to $200 off your order and 2 free pillows. Check it out. I will say this. 2 things. 1, this matters. It matters a lot. So this is literally the fate of the world, because whether or not you're Republican or Democrat, there are big problems this country needs to solve and needs to lead the world on. Call it climate change, call it AI, call it automation that you run on, call it alien coronavirus. And if we do not have if we have a split Congress, I think the odds, case in point with cash relief bill right now, we're not going to get anything done. We can't even get that done. And we have, consensus on it. So that's point 1. And point 2, I think this needs to be said, and I'm going to rant, is that one of the things you did, Andrew, and I think this country owes you debt for, is normalizing cash relief. Now, there's a lot of talk on $2,000, this amount, and they're not talking about Andrew Yang in the press right now. And I think the fact that we're debating amounts instead of debating whether this is a crazy idea or not is a lot to do with why you ran. You have normalized it. The way that Why does Bud Light advertise? It's not because they have a new product or new flavor or anything. Is that they make it normal to order a Bud Light. They make it rational to bring Bud Light to a party and no one questions it. And you normalize cash relief. You normalize universal basic income so that these clowns, frankly, can debate it all day long, but we don't have to debate whether it's a crazy idea anymore because you were the, quote, crazy one. So this country owes you a debt for that, man, whether they give you credit or not. And hopefully the people listening to this agree with me. And I don't know, you're too humble to be like, oh, it's all me, but I will say that it wouldn't be happening, I don't think, if you had run. You know, and you said earlier, I think, wow, I'd shudder to think what solutions they'd be presenting if we hadn't made cash relief an option on the table. Does that make any sense?
Well, I'm super indebted to you and the Yang Gang, everyone listening to this, because we did it. You know, if I had run for president on universal basic income and never made the stages, never reached a level of visibility and prominence where then we could normalize it, then you and I wouldn't be having this conversation. I do think that we have helped make it acceptable for everyone just in the nick of time, and it's here to stay. Like this $2,000 cash relief proposal is going to be kicking around until some version of it passes, I believe, because millions of Americans are looking up being like, wait, like we haven't gotten shit since, you know, April or whatever. That was 9 months ago, and then you're talking about 600, and like a lot of people are like 600, like you know, and then they hear like maybe 2,000. Trump said 2,000. Like, you know, you can't put this genie back in the bottle. you know, like cash relief's here to stay until the economy is prosperous again, and this economy hasn't been prosperous for millions of Americans in decades. So, you know, so it's not going anywhere, and the pandemic has made everything so much worse for tens of millions of people. Super grateful to you, Zach. Super grateful to everyone who believed in us. I hope everyone's proud of what we've done thus far. I certainly am proud. And at this point, I'm very happy to not be the guy who gets credit anytime something positive happens, because that's actually part of the normalization. You know what I mean? Like
that's true.
If you have
it's
these,
like the Yang
if you have
thing.
these, yeah, if you have these legislators who are being like, yeah, then it's like, yeah, sure. I mean, take it, it's yours. You know?
That's true. That's a really good point. You've made this thing a thing, and then you've stepped away at the point where Bernie can support it, Mitt Romney can support it, and the Pope can support it, and it's no one's thing anymore. It's now just its own movement.
Even though it is its own movement, though we're not above like calling people and leaning on them or trying to apply pressure.
Oh yeah, we have a role.
We're like continuing to work, but I'm content to work in a way that I think is effective, and I think that it's more effective if people feel like they can own it.
I agree. There's not, because we like look. You work for CNN. We have all the political reporters nationally and locally we can call out all the time. We are not calling them saying give Andrew more credit because we don't think that's effective. And I agree with that. I think that's been the right strategy. It's working well. Hopefully we get this passed. And hopefully it impacts the Georgia Senate race.
It already has in a wild way. I mean, shoot, but this is here to stay. If John and Reverend Warnock win, it will be much, much more possible to get really positive things out of government. It's why you and I decided to fight it out in Georgia. One of the things I've said, probably in private, but I'll say publicly, whatever, is if you give Washington an excuse not to work, it will take it. Like, this is one way to just get an excuse off the board. Like right now that excuse is Mitch McConnell. It's like everyone just blame everything on Mitch, which is not inaccurate because Mitch is being like a total asshole obstructionist about a lot of things. If we can clear him out, oh my gosh, then like everything becomes possible. So this podcast is in many ways about the here and now, the immediate. It's not too late to help in Georgia. You can still donate to winbothseats.org and money will still flow to organizers. You can still bug your friends in Georgia to vote. You can still try and get something going, even down this last mile, because the votes are going to be counted through Tuesday night. Every vote's going to count. This thing is going to be close. And if we win, it's going to be a new day in DC and a new day in America. And I'm really, really hopeful. Getting to know these candidates has made me even more pumped for them. They would make tremendous U.S. senators, and their opponents are in the Senate now, and not many good things have been happening.
Amen. All right, man. It has been wild to watch this thing shape out. It is wilder that the beginning of 2021 is going to start with such a high-stakes election that we've had a lot of active involvement in. And I'm with you, man, hoping you find some good things to come. So enjoy this clip. It's not a normal podcast.
I interviewed the candidates for an event, and these are clips from that event.
Yeah. So you guys get another candidates bit and get to know hear Andrew's relationship with them too. So enjoy it. John Ossoff, Reverend Warnock, and Andrew
Let's
Yang.
go, Georgia! Georgia Jan 5! Let's do it!
And if you're in Georgia, you better freaking vote.
Georgia. We love you,
better freaking
Georgia.
vote.
We're going to love you even more if you vote blue. We'll love you anyway. Georgia's awesome anyway. But I will say a lot of people in the country will be very excited.
No pressure, Georgia. Go save the world. Love you guys. Enjoy the episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this incredible fundraiser for John Ossoff and Reverend Warnock. Welcome to both of you. You're going to save the country. Yes.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
Wonderful to be here with you to save the country. No pressure at all. None.
No pressure at all. You guys are used to it by now. So one of the arguments I get, because a lot of folks want to see DC come together, and they say, hey, we need bipartisanship. And they're concerned that if we elect both of you, which obviously we're going to do, I mean, that's the thing to do. The concern they have is that somehow a balanced government is better than having one party in charge of everything. Now, I think this is frankly a dumb argument, but what is your response to that voter?
I think a lot of us have been feeling something in our hearts these last few weeks that's a little unfamiliar, given how this year and the last 4 years have gone. And that feeling is hope. Because Trump is leaving, there is light at the end of the tunnel in this pandemic and economic crisis. And zooming out, bigger than that, the chance to author the next chapter in our country's history and to do things that are so long overdue. Expanding voting rights, as the Reverend said, passing a new Civil Rights Act, criminal justice reform, investing in clean energy and infrastructure to both rebuild our economy and create good paying jobs for working people, and also to solve this environmental crisis. To finally make sure, and Andrew, you do such a great job focusing on this, because what has gone wrong in our country that led us to this moment in the first place? Just because Trump is defeated, we have to recognize that these deeper underlying problems persist, and leadership like his only grows out of soil already poisoned. There are just far too many working people in this country who can't make ends meet, who can't afford housing, healthcare, education, the basics, who have no access to dignified work that pays a living wage so they can work just one job, who are denied equal justice under the law, those basic conditions of the beloved community that Congressman Lewis taught us about. And it's just not complicated how we get there. We can see it. We can see that future. It's tantalizing us. We can enact legislation that solves these problems for ordinary people, but only with the Senate. And so as we think about the stakes, yes, it is empowering the health experts and rushing economic relief to people who are suffering. It's also bigger than that. It's also this opportunity to progress America on this journey that drew my mother to this country as an immigrant when she was 23, because she believed America was on this journey toward progress. Let's make the most of this moment, win these 2 races so that we can deliver for people who are hurting and who have been hurting long before this pandemic.
It genuinely does feel like history has found the 2 of you and put you in this position because so much does rest on this race, and there could not be 2 better individuals to represent the Democratic Party and the hopes and dreams of tens of millions of Americans.
We need to invest in America. And one of the things that both John and I agree on, and we've been talking about, is a historic investment in infrastructure, which would include also green infrastructure, so that we create jobs with a livable wage for people in the short term and position the American economy to compete in a global world amidst increasing globalization over the long term.
You know, Reverend and I were discussing this recently, and how an infrastructure plan can really unite the people of the state because of the economic opportunity that it represents for communities, urban, suburban, and rural. Because if done right, it will mean equitable access to economic opportunity for marginalized communities, because it means that those 9 rural hospitals that have closed in 10 years